First of all, I just want to say that if you see cats in the background, just ignore them. And in some of my older videos, if a big golden lab walks into the room and then walks back out, just ignore him. You're here to look at me, not the cats, and not the dog that used to live with me. Now, you might have already discovered that I am rather partial to certain deities and certain myths. And I make no bones about that. Some of my favorites are Persephone and the Pelasgian goddess Eurynome, of whom I'm going to speak today. And I'm also rather fond of Inanna from Sumeria. But today I do want to talk about Eurynome, because she is a Magna Mater of, again, the Pelasgians. And the Pelasgians we will read more about when we get into the chapter on Greek myths. But the Pelasgians were the forerunners of the Greeks. They lived in that area of the world before the people whom we think of as the Greeks moved in. Now, Eurynome, again, was a Magna Mater, and that is Latin for the Great Mother. And I like her myth because it embodies many of the archetypal images that we see in earlier myth, because both the Egyptians and the Sumerians predate Eurynome. But also we see some archetypal images that we will see in later myths. So I'm going to tell you the tale of Eurynome, and I want you to imagine the scene. And all is dark, and there is the great abyss, chaos with a capital C. And out of the abyss, out of the chaos, rises the first being of the universe, and that is Eurynome. Now, there is no explanation for how she came into being, but she is the first. And when she arises from chaos, she begins to dance because she is cold. And she also dances because there is nothing firm in the universe on which she can put her feet. And so she dances to get warm, and she also dances in order to stay aloft. And her dance grows wilder and wilder, and as she spins, the four winds are created from her movements. And she catches the north wind, and she rolls it between her hands, and she creates the great serpent, Ophion. And once created, Ophion begins to dance with Eurynome. And they dance for who knows how long. And finally, they both grow lustful, and Ophion wraps himself around Eurynome, and she conceives. But it's actually the north wind that makes her conceive. And the Greeks did believe for a long time that women and eating female animals could conceive, could get pregnant by standing out into the wind. But at any rate, she conceives the universal egg, the cosmic egg, and she produces this egg. And Ophion wraps himself around the egg 7 times, and he stays there until the egg hatches. And from the egg comes the Titans, Eurynome's children, and all of the planets and all of the stars, and the universe is then created and is no longer void. Now, chaos still exists as well. And by creation, Eurynome instills order on the universe. But because chaos still exists, that order always threatens to slide back down into chaos, and sometimes it does. And then sometimes it has to start over. So after the creation, Eurynome rests, and she and Ophion, who, by the way, is a symbol for the phallus, the male aspect of divine in this myth, she and Ophion settle down for some happily wedded bliss. And the Titans, their children, reproduce and have other children, and Ophion gets an audience. And Ophion, unfortunately, begins to brag. And he says that because he wrapped himself around the egg, and when it hatched was there, said that he alone was responsible for the creation of the universe. Now, Eurynome did not take to this very kindly. As a matter of fact, you could even say it ticked her off a bit. And so she bruised Ophion's head with her heel. Note that wording. And she sent him down into the underworld, which had also been created. And then he became Ophion, the great serpent of the deep. Now, the bruising of the head by the heel is important because later we read in Genesis that after Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree from the knowledge of good and evil, the serpent or the snake influences Eve. And for the snake's punishment, it is said that the descendants of Adam and Eve will bruise his head with their heels. Interesting, eh? Eurynome and some passages in Genesis also have some other similarities. And that Eurynome lays the cosmic egg. And when she does that, she broods on the water, like a hen will brood on a nest. And that's also what Elohim or Yahweh, and I think it's Elohim, does in Genesis. Sits upon the water and broods. Now, who can account for favorites? And again, I've already said that Eurynome is one of my favorites. And I said that I like this tale in part because it embodies so many of the archetypal aspects that we see in other myths. It has the void. In Egypt, it is the watery abyss. And water is a very important archetypal image in creation myth. And also in Eurynome, you have that water. You have then arising from the abyss, the first being. In Egypt, it is Atum. In Norse myth, it is Ymir. And within Greek myth, there are variations on who that first person is. In some myths, it is a hermaphroditic creature. Atum in Egypt is hermaphroditic, the great he, she. And in early myths, it's more often a female. It isn't until the institution of the patriarchies in later myth that we see the male mother, and the male being the first being to arise from the abyss, not ibis. You also see the creation of the rest of the universe. You don't see the creations of humans in this. We will see this in other myth, but you don't see the creations of humans in this. You have the number 7, which is a sacred number in an amazing amount of myths, as is the number 3. You have the snake, and you have the snake in the Jewish creation myth, the serpent in Eden. In Sumerian myth, you have Tiamat. So the snake is an important aspect as well. You have the universal egg. You see this in other Greek myth, and you see this in Chinese myth. You see this in African myth. And you also see the introduction of hubris. Now, hubris is overwhelming pride, inappropriate pride. And we see this in hero tales quite often, and we'll discuss this especially in Gilgamesh and the Greek myths. And Ophion is guilty of hubris. Now, other archetypal images that occur in creation myths are the world tree. We don't see that in this one, but we will see it in other. And again, you do see water in this. This is an important one as well. So that's what I have to say about Eurynome. Oh, one more thing. Because it is a female who arises from chaos, in Greek myth, females continue to be associated with chaos. That isn't something that you need to remember right now, but we will talk about that more when we get into the Greek myth. Males are associated with logic and the sun, and females are associated with chaos and the dark. So that is the tale of Eurynome and her consort, Ophion, great serpent of the deep.